book lovers, I'm Ashley and welcome to Bound by Fantasy, a channel all about books and bookish things. Today I'm going to talk to you about painting book edges. So I did a video before with some ideas on like different ways to paint. I am going to paint 2 more books today, and I'm going to do them with 2 different methods, so we'll kind of see. I want to test them out a little bit more and see how they go. So the first one is going to be A Court of Wings and Ruin. So I've been doing the entire ACOTAR series. And then the next one is going to be A Court of Frost and Starlight. A Court of Wings and Ruin I'm going to do using a paint pen, so an acrylic pen, mainly because it's the right color, but also because I think these ones have been a little bit easier to work with. And then for A Court of Frost and Starlight, I'm going to use an actual like acrylic paint. So I'm going to use this. It's actually glow in the dark paint, although I have painted some others with this and it does not glow in the dark, so I don't know, we'll see, but I like the color. So the first step when you're going to paint books is to cover them. So I always take the sleeve off of the book, and I'm going to just show this with A Court of Frost and Starlight. So I take the cover off of the book, and then I'm going to use just either, you can use really whatever you want to cover it, but you can use like a paper bag, you can use some sort of like packing paper. Honestly, like it's Christmas time, so we're getting close to having like a whole bunch of packages in the mail from, you know, ordering Christmas presents for people. So a lot of packages come with this like just paper packing. And honestly, I've used that several times and it works great because it's super easy to wrap around the book. So I'm going to do this in pieces. I will start with covering the book. And then I also use some sort of painting tape. So I have this like frog tape. Honestly, when I paint, I hate using painting tape, so I never use it anyway. But it works really, really good for books because you don't want to put tape on there that's going to like rip the book when you pull it off. So I want to make sure that it can come off like really easily. So I'm going to cover my book, use the painting tape to, you know, tape it on there, make sure it's on there really good. And then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I am covering the book and I kind of want to do this like, you know, old school style where you want to make sure that the paper that goes into the book, that it goes like pretty far into it. So that way, you know, it's covering like the entire edge, and then I kind of like it to cover like as much of the book as possible. So I'll kind of like pull it down so that it covers as much of the cover as possible before I do it. The other thing that someone pointed out when I was watching a video is to label the paper and write what's the front and what's the back of the book. That way when you're doing you know, stencils or whatever, you know like where the front of the book is. So I am gonna just label that, and that way I know like which is the front of the book as I'm doing this. Hey guys, okay, so I covered the book entirely, so that way it's completely covered. One of the things that I have kind of learned is there's usually like some overlap on the edges and stuff, so what I usually do is like put the tape on the edges, and that way when I clamp it down it stays really well and I don't like get a weird line with the paint when I do it. The other thing that I have learned to do as well is to paint the tape the binding, just to make sure that nothing gets on that binding. And then I usually just use my nail to sort of like push it down into there to make sure that it's all the way up to the edge. So again, like that helps me to make sure that the book's gonna, you know, be good. I also, you know, like I said, I make sure that the tape goes pretty far down, the paper goes pretty far down. The first couple of times I did this, I didn't do that, and I got a little bit of paint on like this page here, so I just want to make sure that that doesn't happen. That can also happen if it's not clamped down super well, so I kind of learned to just make sure that it's clamped down really well, make sure that I kind of put the tape on the edges, and that way it doesn't, you know, get stuck on there or anything. So and then again, remember I said like make sure you label it, because after you clamp it you're not going to know which is the front. So generally I'll just like write like this one, I'm just going to write like an F on the front and then like a B on the back, so that way I know like which is back and front. And so I just kind of labeled that to make sure I know which one's which. And that way as I'm painting, you know, know, when I do designs and things like that, I know that they're face up. I don't know that this one's gonna matter super like too much because I'm gonna do snowflakes on it. But sometimes, you know, it does matter. Like I've done Fourth Wing, and like obviously I want the dragons to face the right way. I did the Harry Potter castle, and I wanted the castle to be facing the right way. So, you know, sometimes that'll matter a lot more, but for this one in particular, it doesn't matter tremendously. But I still like to know like which is the back and which is the front, so I know that I'm painting it correctly. All right, so I'm gonna start just doing the initial paint. So one of the things I've learned with if I'm doing like actual paint and not spray paint is to make sure that I water it down. I didn't do that the first time I did this, and it was super, super thick, and it was very hard for me to pull the pages apart after. So I wanna make sure that, you know, I'm gonna clamp it, I'm gonna clamp the sides of it. And then I want to make sure that as I'm painting, that when I paint it, I want to make sure that the paint is watered down more, and you know, I don't want it to be like super runny, but I want to make sure that it's watered down enough. So as far as the clamps, generally what I do is I will kind of put it like where I'm painting at the moment. A lot of times people just sort of clamp like the edges, but what I kind of find is that like you'll get a little bit of lift as you're going, and like it sort of spreads out a little bit more. So what I find is like as I'm doing, say, this part of it, I will, you know, clamp it as close to that as possible, and then I sort of just like move my clamp down as I'm painting, and that way it's like clamped as best as possible on that spot. I never kind of move the clamps off the book completely, but I at least like kind of just move them around as I'm going to make sure that the space I'm actually painting is clamped down. If you kind of notice like over here, it's not clamped, right? And you can kind of see the spaces going on. So again, like I like to make sure that like wherever I am actually painting, that it's clamped down as best as possible. So I'm gonna do that. I'll get my paints ready, and then I'm gonna start just putting the initial, you know, coloring on there, which is just the blacks or the blue color. So I'm gonna use the blue, paint the edges of it, and start with that. Okay, so I'm gonna talk painting techniques a little bit. So first off, when you get some paint, you wanna make sure you shake it up really well, because acrylic paint especially tends to settle. So a lot of times it'll be like more watery on top and less on the bottom, and then the paint is kind of uneven when you put it on. So you want to just make sure you shake it up first. And then when I paint, as far as like supplies, so I have paint brushes, I have paint in my house. I also have like a little cup that I use for water. As far as like actually kind of mixing the paint, because like I said, I want to like thin it out a little bit. When I paint and when I like blend colors and stuff, honestly, it's gonna sound really silly, but I use just aluminum foil. I find that it works really well to blend colors. Lets me like, you know, put the colors on there, mix them up really well, and then also I can toss it out after, and I'm not getting like paint down my sink and making a huge mess. So I usually just do that, and then so I'm gonna have a little bit of paint here, and then I'm just gonna use my paintbrush and just kind of like separate it a little bit and add some water over here. And as I'm kind of getting the paint, I want to make sure that it's like pretty thin when I'm doing it on my paintbrush, so that way it's not going on really thick. And I'm going to just do this in layers. So as I paint the side of the book, I'll do, you know, just a little bit at a time here, and then I want to just do it kind of in layers and make sure it's going on pretty thin. And I'm going to do it in like multiple layers instead of doing it, you know, all at once. I found that when I did it all at once and it went on really thick, it was very hard to separate my pages after. So I do it in layers, make sure that it's, you know, not going on too thick. So, all right, I will show you in a bit what happens after I put some paint on it. All right, so I painted the first layer of a quart of Frost and so you can see like the blue that's on there, and then I clamped it all the way around as I was going, but now I'm just gonna put like a weight on it to make it heavier, to just like really flatten it out as much as possible. Honestly, I found that these weights just work really, really well. So I'm gonna do that, let it dry for a little bit, and doing another layer of it so that the blue is a little bit more uniform all the way across, and then I'll be adding some designs in the meantime. I'm actually going to work on a quart of Wings and Ruin. This one I'm going to do using the pen instead. And generally I do put the paper on and cover the book every single time, but I'm actually going to see if I could maybe do this one without covering it, just take the dust cover off, and if I can just kind of color it in. So I kind of mentioned that I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. So that one I've done with actual paint. This one I'm going to use an acrylic marker. So this one, using an acrylic marker, I want to use the same color as the book itself. So I started working on it a little bit. I'm going to see if I can get away with not covering it. We'll see how it turns out. But the acrylic markers tend to be a little bit easier to work with, so I'm going to start kind of coloring it. And honestly, with this, I just literally like color it in like if I was coloring a drawing. I'm just going to kind of color along the side, you know, and then I just sort of put a weight on that so that way it works out good. So I'm going to work on that one. I will color that in, see how it turns out, and I'll see if I can get away with maybe not covering that one. We'll find out. All right, let's see. Okay, so I finished painting with the acrylic marker, a quart of Wings in Ruin. So I have the actual like color done. It did go pretty well without actually putting the cover on and everything. I will say maybe a little bit harder and took a little bit longer, but so I don't know, it turned out okay. I think that like with the marker you can get away with that, but definitely not if you're doing paint. So I did do for the blue, did a couple layers of that. At the moment it looks really messy, just because it's got to dry and the outside looks a mess, but once I take it off it'll look a lot better. So then I did this time with this one that I did fan the pages in between layers. So last time I did this, I did not do that. I just like let them all dry together and then I left it overnight and then the pages were really stuck together. So I tried fanning them out in between layers this time, just to kind of separate the pages a little bit better. And then I'm going to let it like dry again, but I think that did help with hopefully allowing it to separate a lot easier. With the acrylic marker, this one like fans much easier, so I can do that like right now and just fan it and it works a lot better. I do like to fan them out just to kind of, you know, make sure that they're separated. I am going to do some sort of design on a quart of Wings in Ruin. I know I want to do snowflakes on a quart of Frost and Starlight, but I don't know what I'm going to do on this one yet. So I'm going to play around with that, make some sort of design on it, and I'll show you what I come up with. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so I finished the A Quart of Wings in Ruin book. I was able to decorate that. I want to show you what that looks like. So because the cauldron was such a huge thing for this one, I decided to paint the cauldron and then moons and stars, and then on each side I did just a little like star design with some like cauldron brew going up. So I think it turned out really cool, and my favorite part is always when I put the cover back on. It looks so incredibly cool. I think it turned out great. I did use the acrylic paint markers for the entire thing, so that worked out pretty good. Now for the other book, well, I'm still working on that one, so I let this one dry overnight. The other thing is that I fanned all the pages out, and one of the things that I find, not just with fanning the pages out, but also that's like super important, is to actually like separate each one. So I did go through and separate each of them yesterday. I am going to decorate this today and do that, and so then I will show you the finished product of what it looks like. Again, having this like front and back labeled is really helpful, because that way when I go to do the design, I'm able to know like which one's which. So I will show you what that looks like when I'm done. Okay, so I finished A Quart of Frost and Starlight. I decided to do snowflakes on each side, and then I also did like tiny little snowflakes that are different colors. So I tried to make like different unique snowflakes on all of the sides, And I think it turned out pretty cool. Again, favorite part is definitely like putting the cover back on, so it was pretty cool. I love seeing it like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, hit the bell, and join our community of fellow bookworms, because here at Bound by Fantasy, the adventure never ends. Thanks so much. See you next time.